This is the first Saturday in the month of November, and so we think about the thinness of the frontier between this life and the next, but also in the context of what we're doing, we think about the other side of things, the way that actually heaven is closer to us than we think. Now remember, our Blessed Lady is the highest of our race, the most beautiful of all creatures, but she is of our race, and therefore she's on our side of humanity, and she's concerned. She can see far more than we can, and we know from observing what happens in, by now, videoed ecstasies in different places in the world, that when she is talking to more than one person at the same time, she is able to carry on an independent conversation at the same time. So she is sharing in the knowledge of her Divine Son. We don't exactly know how things work in the beyond, but we can presume that Our Lady has the maximum of gifts imaginable. Hence it is that she is listening when we're praying. But she's far more interested when we're interested too. So remember that bit. Try and avoid this element of just automatism. When we are in prayer, we're not robots. We're not tape recorders or Tibetan prayer machines. We are engaging in relationship. And the rosary, like Gregorian chant, has the advantage of giving you the opportunity to take off. It's a possibility, it's a locus, it's a context in which we can be launched. But the launching must take place. Launching is not, e.g., how do I solve this problem which is on my mind right now while the prayers are going up? Now, if we're honest, that goes on more than we think, or more than we care to admit at least. I may have told you before about the monk who was allowed to see the prayers of the choir, how there were angels and they were carrying up the prayers of the brethren. And some had plenty to carry, others less, and others little or nothing, depending on how much engagement was going on. Also, there is, in recent times, this interesting testimony of this little girl. She would be of First Communion age in the States, and on the Feast of the Guardian Angels, she was shown the guardian angels of all in the chapel. And she was also shown various parts of the celebration, including what happened when it came to the angels presenting the gifts of the children present. Some angels were really happy and they had lots to carry. Others were, if they were human beings, what we would call cheesed off. There was no business, nothing doing. The person was miles away and the prayer was not rich or heavy. So that's the bit that depends on us. Are we going to make sad our guardian angel or delight him? Now remember that the guardian angel also is saddened by not being honoured. It's kind of important that we don't leave him without a job to do. He's delighted when we address ourselves to him. And remember, we only have one guardian angel and he only has one ward. He does not have another person forever. So that's the personal relationship we have with him. And he, rather like our Blessed Lady, is on the other side and can see a lot more than we can. He can also see what we can't here at the altar. And by the way, this little child was also shown how at the consecration there was a whole movement of angels towards the chalice, towards the moment and place of consecration. And she also saw that there was a very powerful angel whom she was able to identify. It was St. Michael, right by the priest, at the moment of into the Eucharistic prayer and onwards, where the priest was going to be the living channel between heaven and earth. And also, she noticed that Our Lady was present at that moment, but slightly behind the priest, which is interesting because there she is honouring the priesthood. Remember now that she is reported to have said, at Medjugorje for instance, that we have to be aware of the power of the priest's blessing, and that she herself can't give that blessing, that same power, because the priest's blessing is that of Christ her Son, which is therefore divine. And things happen also with regard to healing. I may have told you before how this rector that we had in Rome, who'd been a missionary all his life, had been witness to so many miracles. But one time he was telling us this to remind us. He actually said to us in a homily one morning in chapel, we priests don't realize the power that we have. And how he had this lady, a good African lady, who had brought this child who was dying to him for one last blessing. So he blessed sincerely this child, and he just added calmly, now that child is a young man in his early 20s. But he was reminding us, don't take priestly blessings lightly. It's Christ in your fingers and limbs. And of course that comes through in the ordination itself, when those hands are anointed, consecrated. And that's why we know that heaven prefers that that should be also the protection of the Blessed Sacrament. And just be aware that whatever is the apparent norm right there, out there in the world right now, things are happening which perhaps are preferred not to happen. Because we know that once one takes away one bit after another of protection and separation and specialness of the divine, I think you know what I mean, then we forget. And also, God is not necessarily free to bless fully as he would if he were given the maximum of honor. So if we want to honor God and receive the blessings, we do so under his terms and his conditions. We don't bully God around and expect him to follow. It doesn't quite work. One notices how spontaneously and without fuss or bother God blesses where he is genuinely honored. So we start from that end and the rest will follow. With regard to this honoring of heaven, it's going to be interesting what happens next year, 100 years after Fatima. But one bit often is forgotten, and that is the centrality of the Blessed Sacrament also in that cycle of events. Now, it's 100 years right now since it started, because it started with the angel coming in 1916. And what was he doing? He was adoring. They were being given prayers of adoration, of reparation, but he was also using his, well, angelic body, whatever that may be, to adore, as it were, physically. And he was showing them how it was done. He went down on his forehead. Now that's interesting, because we have lost some of that in the West in recent years. It's come back in certain circles, like the charismatic renewal, but it's been lost massively because we sit for all kinds of things and we just use the mind, which is precisely what the Protestants do. They sit. They get up for the hymns, but they sit for everything else. And it's boring, compared with what we have if we use it. So let's get this straight. We're body and soul, and the angels, in a sense, admire us and have envy of us because we can do things that they can't do. We can suffer, they can't. We can be ordained priests, they can't. So let's, as we come now to the altar, remember that we're truly in relationship. We're not just going through motions, but we're using our body to make up, both for what's not being done perhaps elsewhere, but also for what we're not doing properly. We need to use our body well, and that there must be one linear movement. That is to say, we don't use that body afterwards to disobey. E.g., the tongue that receives the Lord must be under the lordship of Christ and not be wagging to produce sounds and noises that he doesn't want to hear. It's the same Lord. So we offer him this throne, and we then offer him also authority over that tongue. Not a word that he would not be willing to bless. Also, our body. We don't do anything naughty with our body, and we use it, as it were, a sacrament of our soul, e.g., how much we can do for good or for bad with that same body. We are, in a sense, able to do more than the angels on that level. We can hug, we can squeeze, we can feel warmth, or we can be bullies. It's the same body. And by the way, look after your body with regard to accidents and sports. We don't want to upset our guardian angel by being careless, as when we're driving a car. We are responsible for the consequences. So, I just finish. Use well your body. Use well your tongue. Use well your mind. And also, use well your God. Adore inside and outside, and let there be a wedding between your soul and your body. So all you do with the body is an expression of your mind and heart. Then your angel will have lots and lots and lots of good things to carry up in prayer. Dominus vobiscum,
et cum spiritu tuo,
ora